Welcome back, one and all, to the Out of the Main podcast. Of course, we were born at sea, raised on radio. Welcome to the folks who are tuning in to YouTube to see this, not live, but to see it sort of more in person. John, we lost a legend recently.
God, we lost several all in 1 week. What was it? Hulk Hogan, Connie Francis, Ozzy Osbourne, Malcolm Jamal Warner, who I guess I understand is a bass player.
He was a bass player and a jazz aficionado.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then of course,
and Tom Lehrer also.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then of course, Chuck Mangione, which is the reason that we are here. We've long been admirers. We've talked about that on the podcast. Even when we had Grant Geissman on, we talked about it, but we've even dropped Mangione tracks in here and again, even outside of the yacht rock parameters. So this is sort of, we got here because a couple of years ago or so, I hired online, just went online, found a musician looking for somebody who would play trumpet on a song that I was doing for Page 99 called In My Imagination. And, it's difficult to sift through all those people, but the one that stuck out to me was Tony Guerrero, because he specifically said, if you're looking for that screaming trumpet guy, or I am not the guy, but if you want smooth or something like, that Mangione might deliver, then I'm your guy. And I'm like, that's what I wanted. So I hired him to play flugelhorn on this track called In My Imagination. And the playing was so good that I said, this guy has to have done more than, just be a session guy for hire online. So I go and look him up. And what a bunch of credits. Tom, do you have those in front of you?
I do not. No, I do no show prep,
well,
as you
I'll
know.
give a little bit. I know, no show prep, but was it like 9 solo albums, other albums with either a quintet or quartet, sideman for, let's see, we got High School Musical 3, sideman for Brian Wilson, Paul McCartney, Tony Childs, John Tesh Big Band. So I hired an unknown legend, I guess, and that is our guest today, Tony how do I say it? Guerrero?
Well, I'll tell you what, you're asking the wrong person because I can't say my own name correctly. So you're supposed to be able to
say my own name.
You're supposed to be able to roll your R's, and I can't do that.
It's Guerrero.
I just say Guerrero. Yeah.
All right, Guerrero or something else.
Well, welcome to the show, Tony. Really excited to talk
Thanks for
to
having
you.
me.
We'll get into the Chuck Mangione thing in just a bit. But
Sure.
Tell us a little bit more about you. So what is your primary instrument by trade, or do you even have one?
Really, trumpet and flugelhorn has been my primary. So I started playing when I was 9 years old, and then I liked it, but it was my junior high music teacher who really caused me to love music, and part of that was Chuck Mangione's music. He introduced me to Children of Sanchez in particular. He had our band, a little school band, playing that. And at the time, like most kids, I was into rock and roll. I was into Kiss and Led Zeppelin and all the late 70s stuff. And that was the first time I heard anything that had that kind of raw rock energy that I could play on my horn. I was totally oblivious to anything except school band music as far as playing trumpet. So
awesome.
Yeah, so that was it.
Is there anything significant that John left off your rap sheet that we should know about? Those are some pretty impressive names you played with.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I've had. I'm an old guy, so I've had a lot of years where I could pile stuff on, but some of those names you mentioned obviously are some great names. I've been working with Arturo Sandoval. I produced his last couple of records.
Wait a minute.
Yeah,
he's the screamer of all screamers. Him and
he is.
Come
Yeah.
on. Really?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, we don't meet in that area at all, but he's also one of the most beautiful, sensitive players around. And so we definitely meet there. So yeah, I've produced his last couple records, and we were nominated for a Grammy for the first one out of those. And I work a lot with Jane Lynch as her music director, and we actually go on the road. We're about to go on the road next week. She does a cabaret show.
Wow.
And just a very, very things. I get to do stuff with Dick Van Dyke occasionally, just
Oh my
a lot of fun stuff.
Are you band leader when you
So
go with Jane's
I
thing?
am. She actually specifically just hires my regular quintet. So we've been actually touring with her for, geez, 10 years now. Yeah.
Interesting.
Wow. Okay.
So,
I may have the dates wrong, but did you play a gig last night, a tribute to Mangione, something with the quintet?
No, I played a show with my quintet last night, but the one you might be thinking of, I have a show next week. There's a project of mine that I call Abrazo, which is basically my version of all that Mangione style. It's the Latin, Brazilian, that kind of those kind of melodies, and it's sort of the offshoot of all my Mangione influence into my original music. And
Okay.
so we're doing that show next week. So we're advertising it. All the advertising kind of blurs together, maybe. And then
Good
I,
for me to mind,
I'll tell you, There's only been one time I've avoided doing a Mangione tribute night ever, my whole life until just last year. I was convinced to do one. So we did do an actual Mangione tribute night. We'll probably, now that he's passed, probably find another night to do that where it's specifically playing his music.
Yeah, because you don't want it to look as though you're capitalizing on, especially when he's one of
Right.
your heroes. So
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
you grew up, as it became, so you sort of discover through the song "Children of Sanchez." But obviously, that is a little bit later in his career,
Right.
in the sense that it's past "Feels So Good." It's past the "Fun and Games" album,
Right.
if I recall. Is that right?
I think Fun and Games might have come after that, but I guess I think
But
Children
he
of
had already
Sanchez
hit
was
it
right
big
after
with
Feel
"Feels
So
So
Good.
Good." Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. As you then grew in your appreciation for him, obviously you looked back at older albums. What were the songs then later on that, as you mentioned, sort of the Brazilian, Latin? You always had that Latin bass line in so many of his tracks. What
Right,
were the
right.
ones that really then grew on you over time?
Well, certainly Land of Make Believe. I mean, that's been the one consistent Mangione song I've done my whole career in shows. If I'm doing one, it's most likely going to be that. But his albums from the early '70s, the early and mid '70s, right before Feel So Good, those are the ones that really, once I got into his music, really captivated me. The ones with his quartet or quintet and the orchestra, like the Bella Via record,
Yep.
Chase the Clouds Away. Those two records are just seminal for me. They're just so powerful to listen to. So, I mean, I could name all the songs, I guess, but it's really
Probably.
all of the songs on those records just killed me. And then going back to his bigger concerts with Friends in Love, and I'd seen Mangione perform many times over the years, but never with an orchestra, and I regret that I was never able to do that. But those records mean a lot to me. I used to just, as a kid, just like I have headphones on now, I'd come home
Yeah.
from school and just put those records on, and
Well, you put on your post, you put this on Facebook. That's kind of what started this. You had a really nice sort of eulogy sort of post about Chuck Mangione on your Facebook page. And part of it was the picture opened up the gatefold of the Live at the Hollywood Bowl album, where you see
yeah,
that whole orchestra on stage. And that album is absolute essential listening in the Nixon household growing up.
yeah.
And I just listened to it last night, and it is still fresh to me, that particular quartet and that particular recording with the orchestra. Talk to me about that album. Do you?
Yeah. I really that if there's ever been a moment of somebody else's life that I've aspired to, it's probably that moment that's on that photograph where his back is to the audience and he's conducting this 70-piece orchestra. Like that image is just ingrained in my head. And as a kid who knew nothing about what it would take to get there, that I just dreamed of, like other kids wanted to be rock stars. Like that's what I wanted, was to stand in front of a group like that. Um, and yeah, there's obviously something very special about that night and that performance. And you're in Los Angeles with some of the great players playing in that orchestra, and um, at the time, homecoming for Charles Meeks and Grant Geissman, and
Neat, man.
and the Hollywood Bowl, which you can't beat it as a concert venue. I mean, there's just something very magical about all that. And when you read the liner notes in there, it talks about how almost rushed the whole process was, and how much they had to pack in and rehearsal, and
You
and
see the
the
charts that are about nine
yeah,
pages
yeah.
wide.
Yeah, and those are sometimes, in my own experience, those are sometimes the best nights when you've got the most amount of pressure and the most amount of stuff that you could be worried about, and it just all comes together magically. I work a lot with John Tesh, and he talks about how he mortgaged his house and basically put up all of his money to do his very first PBS special because PBS wanted the special but weren't going to pay for it. And so his very first PBS special was all on him. And they're at the concert. I think it was at Red Rocks maybe, and like a few tunes in, thunderstorm and rain just comes in, and he's got a full orchestra and all of his money invested.
Oh,
And so they ended up like having to continue. The orchestra left; they wouldn't stay out there with their instruments,
sure.
and this magical stuff happened where he had to like keep playing, and then at one point the skies opened up and the orchestra came back out, and he just talks about how
Got chills you explaining it.
yeah, I mean it's just a moment that you can't plan for, and all the planning in the world doesn't help, and that's sort of how the liner notes from that live at the Hollywood Bowl album describe it. Obviously, I wasn't there, but it comes across in the recording. There's just a lot of love and excitement in that
But that was a
recording, and
one night gig and one night recording for that record.
as far as I know, yes, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Tony, another reason that John sort of reconnected with you is he saw this Facebook post that he mentioned. So can I just read a
Right.
little bit of it? Because
Sure.
I told John, I said, I think this should serve as the de facto eulogy for Chuck Mangione. I'm sure some
Oh,
family
yeah.
member will do a heartfelt job, but just in
Yeah.
part, I owe my life to Chuck Mangione, not the living, breathing part, but the life I've led as a musician. I didn't know Chuck. We never crossed paths other than being a fan. I interviewed him once for radio station KSBR and was able to introduce him before one of his concerts at Orange Coast College. It's really cool. I always wish we were LA based, so then maybe I would have more professional opportunity with him. But maybe it's better this way. Having him be an unknown to me personally has kept some of that wizard behind the curtain mystique alive for me. I get to still enjoy his music as the 13-year-old kid who would come home from school, put my headphones on, and stare at the pictures in the Live at the Hollywood Bowl album, dreaming that maybe someday. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah,
What
thank you.
about his approach? We talked about, John joked about the screaming, right? And certainly Chuck was very rarely that, if ever. Although there were some pretty high screams, maybe there was at times. What is it about his approach, his style, his life that so endears you to him?
Well, when you say his life, like obviously I didn't know him personally. I only know what I've learned over the years. I mean, he came from a big Italian family. Half of my family is Italian, and the Italians are very gregarious and full of love and hugs, and that big family Sunday night dinner thing that you kind of imagine with an Italian family.
Right.
And so I know he came from that background, and his parents were so supportive. His dad drove him to all the concerts when he and his brother Gap were kids, and so much so that they started inviting these legends to their house. And so Dizzy Gillespie and Sarah Vaughan and Ron Carter and all these legends were coming over to the Mangione house to have dinner and after shows. And so, there's a big part of that upbringing and that kind of love that I think kind of showcases itself in his music. People often refer to his music as being Latin influence, which it definitely is. But I hear, and there's a lot of Brazilian influences, but really I hear a lot of Italian melodies. Like if you start going to Italian opera or even like Bocelli records, some Pavarotti recordings, you'll hear those kind of melodies coming across these intervals that can like tug at your heartstrings, but they're all over Mangione's music. And so I think there was a lot of Italian influence in his music that we don't necessarily it doesn't get mentioned a whole lot, but I've paid attention to that. And a big part of that, Italian music is very melodic, and that's what really has always captured me was that idea of melody, not only the melody of the song, but the melody. His approach to improvising was very melodic, and so I've tried to pursue that as a soloist as well, to try to create melodies as I'm improvising. And occasionally I get it.
Well, You mentioned the family concept, John. You observed something that I had never picked up on, and now
Oh,
that you said it, it's like it's everywhere. And I want to get Tony's take on it too. But John, you said it seems as though when either a live performance or a song itself, that Chuck would rather maybe have Grant or Chris be the stars and let them solo and show off every lick they got, where he was more reserved. And I wonder if that goes back to that. We're all one big happy family. It's not the Chuck Mangione show.
mm.
I've stumped you
Yeah,
both. Okay.
No,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
didn't know it to go.
I mean, I certainly couldn't speak for him. I know as a trumpet player, I have to be off the horn, a bit too, because it's a tough instrument to play all night long. And we were talking about the high note stuff. He wasn't known as a screamer necessarily, like let's say Maynard Ferguson, but he wrote a lot of high music for flugelhorn. Flugelhorn was not, I think, not originally intended to play in that upper range, and he's up there quite a lot. And in fact, the one song I've always avoided playing of his is his biggest hit, "Feels So Good," because there's this octave leap in that melody that to be totally frank, he missed it sometimes when you hear
Sure.
recordings. But I just never wanted to be in front of an audience and like so obviously messing it up. So I just avoided playing that song specifically because of the range. But yeah, a lot of his songs went up there pretty high.
It's funny,
Uh,
those little misses of his are sort of part of his sound in a
they
way.
are.
And
Yeah.
you brought me to the picture of the way that record starts, and you hear the crowd milling around, and then obviously he walks out on stage, and there's a sort of a modicum of applause, and he has to start just absolute naked with that
Right.
intro with "Feels So Good,"
Yeah.
and yeah, that's a tricky one to hit, man.
Yeah, I mean the trumpet in general and flugelhorn, they're just very unforgiving instruments.
Yeah.
They're not. I joke around with my sax player a lot because when I crack a note, it's really obvious to everybody, I think. And saxophones can crack notes left and right, and it just sounds like a saxophone. They get away with a whole lot more. Um, yeah, so
Is there something
But
yeah.
about the? Go ahead, John.
it's also a little misunderstood then how much Rhodes playing than Chuck would do. When he's not playing the trumpet, he was sitting at the Rhodes, and he
Right.
seems fairly accomplished at that as well.
Yeah, interestingly, I never, other than just like playing the songs, you never really hear him feature himself on the roads.
No.
Like I don't remember any keyboard solos on his records or anything like that he had done. But certainly as just part of the song, it was his quintet for the kind of music he was doing. His quintet was actually pretty pared down. Like actually his one of the records of his I loved was from the early '70s, just the Chuck Mangione quartet record, which was just bass, drums, sax, and flugelhorn. There was no guitar, no, yeah, that's that one right behind you, yeah.
That's one.
There's no guitar, there's no keyboard, and that's that whole Chet Baker, Jerry Mulligan setup
Yeah.
that took away that harmonic instrument. Um, and when we got into his Feel So Good days, it was all guitar based. So he would play Rhodes, but you go see that band live, and it was that instrument was missing. Which an instrument like the Rhodes fills up a certain part of the sonic atmosphere. So
Yeah.
when it's not there, all of a sudden it
Yeah,
can
that
be
mids.
kind of a hole. Yeah, and so
Yeah.
that's you got a guy like Grant Geissman who can fill up all that space so well.
Yeah, because he used it fairly strongly on like on the "Feel So Good" album, "Hide and Seek" or something that starts with that
Right.
bump, bump, bump.
Yeah.
But he also, this was one of my favorites, "Main Squeeze."
Yeah, it's a great record.
Has some yachty guys on this one. We've covered this one before. Steve Gadd plays on this. Ralph McDonald, Don
Yeah.
Grolnick. But yeah, the one song, the very first song, "Day After Our First Night Together," which I consider
Love
one
that.
of his quote hits.
Yeah.
That starts with the melody on Rhodes. And I'm going to assume he's playing that, not Grolnick.
Probably, yeah. Well, yeah, I guess I don't know. Who knows?
Well,
What I
that goes back to what you were saying about him, Tom, Chuck. That like, going back to the whole featured thing was I made the sort of comparison to Miles Davis. That Miles Davis always was unafraid to have great band members around him and to let them shine. They weren't there just to service his need as a leader.
Yeah.
They were allowed to have their own place, and sometimes that space was even larger than his. When you think of like the Kind of Blue album, for example.
Tony, is there something for the laypersons in our audience, of which I am one? Is there something unique about the flugelhorn specifically that maybe lends itself to? We talked, John, about how the sax is so ubiquitous in every form of rock and roll, R&B, yacht rock, whatever it is. And listener Mike surmised that it's the instrument that sounds most like the human voice, so it's pleasing to the ear. Is there something about the flugelhorn, Tony, that is maybe a little softer or mellower than, say, a trumpet that lends itself to this melodic approach to basically taking fusion and putting it into the pop realm?
Yeah, I mean it is definitely a mellower version of the trumpet. I mean you technically you're playing it the same way. The mouthpiece is a little deeper, which adds to that tone. The piping is wider. It comes the flare on the bell is much bigger. And all of that just contributes to it being a warmer sound. And as such, again, I don't believe was really intended to be up in the higher atmosphere, but there are some players who do that beautifully on flugelhorn. But yeah, you're not going to get that really bright, brash sound out of a flugelhorn that you get out of a trumpet. Like the fanfare from Rocky wouldn't be quite as exciting on flugelhorns. And flugelhorn was it's a German origin, and it was intended to kind of be take the place of French horns in like a marching band situation.
Oh, okay.
It's just kind of a little bit mellower. Flugelhorn's sort of in between a trumpet and a trombone or French horn. Somewhere in that.
Is
in
it
that
charted
range.
and treble clef
Yeah, it's all exactly the same as
and
trumpet.
in C?
Yeah,
Or is it B
in
flat?
B flat, B flat, right.
Now you're
Yeah.
getting us into trouble.
And I was gonna mention this. One of the things you were saying a minute ago about those players in the band. That we've seen that throughout music where the Beatles could only be the Beatles with those four guys. It might have been great with others, but it was great with those four. And Duke Ellington, his band, his scores were always written for the individual players, not
Johnny
just third.
Hodges.
Yeah, not it wouldn't the scores wouldn't say first alto or third trumpet. It would have the guy's name
Yeah.
because it was written for their personalities. And there is something very special about that Feel So Good band where each of those guys had something very unique in themselves to contribute. And I really learned that. I've played with Grant quite a bit, and you definitely hear when he's playing guitar, you hear Grant Geissman. Like he sounds. Nobody sounds like him. He just plays like himself. But I noticed that one time when I got to play with Charles Meeks, who I just actually got an email from today,
Wow.
which was nice to hear from him. But the first time I played with Charles, we were playing with some other musicians, and we did a song of mine, and it was a bass part I had written out specific for this song. And as soon as he started playing, I'm like, that sounds like Charles Meeks playing my bass line. Like I'd had 20 other bass players play it, but that sounded like Charles. And there's just something special about those guys and what they brought to Chuck's music. And
Yeah, that
it's
is
just
such the definitive sound for me, those four guys. Even though when I
right.
looked at it, it was a relatively short-ish run. I mean, they did the Feel So Good album. They did then the live album. They did the Fun and Games album. And then the Children of Sanchez soundtrack,
Yeah,
which
that was
is
it.
really the same theme, just kind of rebuilt in a bunch of different ways.
Right.
That's it, right? Or they weren't on like
That
Tarantella or anything, right?
they were on Tarantella.
Vidala hung around for a while
Yeah,
after some of the other guys, but
he
but
stayed
still
longer.
wasn't
Yeah,
a long run for those guys. But
no, yeah, but I think you're right. I think they were all on Tarantella.
So,
Yeah,
Tony, you say you've played with Grant Geissman and Charles Meeks both. Have you
yeah.
played with the two of them as Chuck Mangione? Have you played a Chuck Mangione song with these cats?
oh, come on.
I've never played a Chuck tune with Charles. I don't think I have played some Chuck tunes with Grant over the years. In fact, there's a YouTube video from 2021 where we did Chuck's tune "Last Dance," and it's me with Grant.
Oh, you got to get us
Uh,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
That had to be an out of body experience for you.
Yeah, I mean, I was always a little hesitant because, you want to be respected. I met Grant when I was in college. I'll tell you that story real quick. So, I was in college. My band director let me kind of take over one of our concerts. So we were going to do some originals of mine and some arrangements, and I brought in our some of my jazz buddy musicians that I was working with in clubs outside, and with our school big band. And so this concert was very special to me. And I was going to bring in this guitar player who was a great guitar player locally, a guy named JR. And he, at the last minute, had to cancel on me. And he said, "Hey, I'm so sorry, I got to cancel on you, but I have three subs lined up. You can pick, whoever you want. They're all available." And he read me two names, and then the third name was Grant Geissman, and my jaw dropped. Like,
Yes, please.
are you giving me Grant Geissman's phone number? And so,
The general.
I mean, I was like 18 years old or something. Like, of course I'm going to call this guy. I mean,
Oh, cool.
I was so like, it was so weird for me to be thinking about calling him, but he came and did this concert with my college big band. Of course, to all the guys in my college, I was a hero. Um, and I shudder to think how bad it all sounded and how much Grant must have, probably hated being there, except that he's a cool guy,
Yeah,
you
he
know.
is.
But he came in as a special guest and played that. And then over the years after that, I had his phone number, so I would occasionally call him. So he would play. He ended up playing on my very first record. He played on an album I did in 2008. And then over the years, just various concerts and events. He appeared in some of I used to do these big holiday concerts. He appeared in some of those. So he was always very gracious, and I was never quite anywhere near his league, but he was always very nice to me with that. And so all that to say that when it comes time to like doing a song from Chuck, he knows what a fan I am. And it was always a little embarrassing to go, "Hey, can we play a Chuck Mangione tune?"
I get to play Chuck, right?
But honestly, the truth is, as you know, because you've talked to Chuck, and to Grant, Grant's a fan of those days and that music.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so he loves doing it. And in fact, one time I was producing an album for a sax player, and we did a bossa nova version of "Feels So Good." And he asked if Grant would play, and I said, "Oh, I don't know if I should ask Grant. Like, that's such a signature song for Grant." And I finally thought, all right, I sent Grant a note and I just said, "Listen, I hesitate to ask you this. Please say no, like, because I know this is probably awkward. Would you play on this cover of Feel So Good?" And he basically wrote back, he goes, "How can I not play on it?"
Right.
You
Yeah.
know?
Who else is going to do the
Yeah.
guitar solo?
Right. Yeah. So,
Did he try to
that
mimic anything from the original when he did his lead on the Bossa Nova
he
style?
did. He actually played a little hint of the solo in there, yeah, of the
That's
original
cool.
solo. So, yeah, so Grant's very, very cool with all of this stuff, and always been very welcoming to that era of his life. I mean, he's certainly done a million things since then on his own, but he seems happy to revisit that. So,
I had this weird observation yesterday when I was listening to the live album, Made It to Side 4, and I was thinking about, obviously, this conversation, and I know that when you play, that you have a quintet. And
Yeah.
so obviously a smaller combo thing, and I'm picturing, playing smaller venues maybe. But so side 4 starts with Children of Sanchez, and it's Chuck's biggest, possibly most just explosive song.
right.
And then it becomes the quietest moment in the whole show, where it sounds like it's really just the quartet and Chuck, almost as if they're a band in the corner of a restaurant,
Right.
trying. Sorry, it's choking me up. I don't know why, but trying to play quiet for the diners that are eating. So here he is in the Hollywood Bowl, huge orchestra in front of him, huge audience, just coming off of Children of Sanchez, and it's bye-bye, and it's
Right.
so quiet.
Yeah. 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 That's.
Can you imagine taking your quintet into a room like that and then playing like that? I mean, it just seemed so out of body.
To be honest, my favorite kind of gigs to do, well, I shouldn't say my favorite, but one of my favorite gigs to do is whenever I get an opportunity to do something that's intended to be very soft. I mean, not like the corner of a restaurant where nobody's listening, but in a concert setting. Like my last album that I released a year ago was a piano and trumpet duo. And when I get to do shows with the brilliant piano player named Jeremy Siskin, I love getting to play quiet like that. And so there is actually there's a huge power to being in a large space, and then bringing it down like that, and to have it where it forces everybody to listen in that sense. if you ever saw Tony Bennett in concert, and I saw him at the Hollywood Bowl, he did this. He dropped the mic, and at one point it was just him singing, no microphone, to the Hollywood Bowl, just his voice. And like you said, you could hear a pin drop, and everybody could hear him because they were just so focused. So there is, I would imagine that moment on that album was very much like that, where after this big bombastic thing and all that power, it just zeroed everybody in.
Thinking of the Billy Joel concerts at Madison Square Garden, where he then just comes out and does a few numbers by himself, and it's cool because you also get to like hear how the song was written, right? When it's just the guy at the piano. So, one thing I didn't realize about Chuck Mangione, you mentioned his earlier stuff. I didn't realize until recently that he goes all the way back to the Art Blakey band in the '60s.
Art Blakey, yeah.
Wow. Art Blakey, yeah.
Even before that, I mean, his first albums were with his brother Gap. They had a group called the Jazz Brothers, and they ended up being produced by Cannonball Adderley, and Dizzy Gillespie was a supporter of theirs, and I mean, you listen to those two records. I mean, Chuck is playing like a bebopper. I mean, his main influence was Dizzy Gillespie, and you could hear that in those records. You can hear that in later years too, but definitely that was his approach in those early records. And then Dizzy recommended him to Art Blakey. So I think that it was a short-lived stint, I think, but I think that was in 1966, and there's one album from that time. But by that time, he had kind of built a reputation. I think Maynard recorded one of his tunes around that time. But that Art Blakey record is great. Keith Jarrett is on piano. I mean, it's a great record.
And is he playing trumpet on there, or is he playing flugelhorn?
He's playing trumpet, straight trumpet. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So flugelhorn doesn't really appear that I know of until more in the late '60s, like when he started doing his own music.
You mentioned, you kind of hit on a point I was going to ask, because a while back we had an interview with the great Jerry Hay, speaking of trumpet players.
Yeah.
And I posed a question to him, and I thought I knew what the response was going to be, because I asked him about Maynard. And he was a bit ho-hum to Maynard. So obviously Maynard, not your style, but what were your thoughts on Maynard Ferguson since we're in this realm?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't knock what he did. I mean, in the sense that he was spearheaded that whole type of playing, and he was brilliant at it. When you're in high school, trumpet is like when trumpet's your instrument and you're still thinking about being a rock star, like you gravitate towards those kind of players. And to be honest, I got into Maynard for a couple of weeks with all my friends, like we were really into it. And then I just realized kind of, this is really cool, and I appreciate it, but it's not what I love.
It's kind of Jerry Hay's response in a nutshell.
Yeah, so it just wasn't something that I loved enough to pursue trying to be that player. I don't even know if I could have had I tried, but I just never pursued it. And I found myself not only gravitating to Chuck, but as I learned about other players, it was
who do you love?
Chet Baker and Art Farmer and Miles Davis, and really, like, I love the softer side of the horn. And I appreciate, and honestly, I wish I could do all that big stuff at that level. But it's never what I pursued, but I just do love that soft, really my favorite instrument for a melody is the cello. So for me, as close as I can get my horn to sound like a cello, that's what I'm trying to go for,
So when you guys mentioned Maynard Ferguson, so this is why I'm going to ask my betters. My sense is that Chuck Mangione was like the pioneer. I don't mean the first, but maybe the pioneer of taking this jazz, creating it pop melody, and infusing it into pop music, and taking it mainstream. And then others would go on to do that. David Sanborn, notably. Is that accurate, or where is his legacy? And if it's not that,
if we think about pop music after the '70s, then maybe, but really, like, the music was so different that there's a big blur there. Like, as you get into the '50s, there was instrumental music that were considered pop tunes.
Take Five went #1 as an example.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely jazz, but it had that kind of popularity. Sure. But in the '60s, you had Herb Alpert, and even Acker Bilk and Strangers on the Shore and like all these different kinds of instrumental melodies that were out there in the 50s and 60s. They would be considered pop music of that time. Even what's the big surf tune? Yeah, a lot of surf music was instrumental too.
True.
It wasn't jazz, but it was instrumental. But as far as the kind of crossover that Chuck had into that pop mainstream, he was the first that did it in any of that kind of in that kind of genre, really, like the what we might consider modern rock or pop. He was the first that I can think of. In his era, Spyro Gyro was starting to get
Oh,
heard,
yeah.
but it wasn't
Yeah.
Didn't
quite as
quite cross
big.
over as much.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then in
and
the 80s, of course, you had Kenny G and
Yeah.
Herb Alpert still had hits. His
Sure.
big hit Rise was 1980, only a couple years after Feel So Good.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and really in the 60s, there was nobody bigger than Herb Alpert. I mean, I love going to estate sales, and I always comment that when you're looking through old records from that era, you always see a Herb Alpert record. You
Yeah.
might also see Rolling
Usually whipped
Stones or
cream.
Beatles or whatever, but you will always see Herb Alpert records.
Always the whipped
Every
cream album.
every house had them. Yeah. So,
that album made me blush when they were sitting in
No.
Dad's. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, before we started this, before we let you go, Tony, I know
yeah.
you mentioned off air that you have a connection through
Oh.
into the yacht rock realm. So for the people that have been sitting here waiting for yacht rock to come up, this is
Okay.
this is the time.
Yeah. Wait,
All
Chuck
right, well-
Mangione's not Yachty? Anyways, I defer.
Well, yeah, I'm very good friends with David Pack from
Nice.
Ambrosia.
It's Tom's
And-
favorite.
And
Yes.
yeah, David is a brilliant musician, and he and I became good friends. Gosh, almost 20 years ago. And I've played keyboards in his band several times over the years, and we've collaborated on some concerts and various things. And in fact, you'll kind of go crazy, but at this, but I work. My band works at a club nearby called Campus Jacks. And it's a venue that holds about 150 people or so, just bar, restaurant, really nice stage, good sound system. So we bring a lot of jazz acts in there. But David came in and did a fundraiser there in this small little venue, and he had himself, David Benoit, Alan Parsons, Kenny Loggins, and Michael McDonald,
Oh,
all on this little stage that, like, if you ever want to see yacht rock heroes, to see them up close. I mean, there's not a seat in that house that's more than 50 feet away from the stage. So
I can't believe
that
a
was
black
pretty
hole
great.
wasn't created in the universe.
Oh
at
my!
that time.
And I would be
Right.
gladly sucked into it. I'd be like, "Get me in there."
Yeah, so that was pretty great. So David's a good friend of mine. We talk fairly often, and I'll have to connect you guys. So.
Why are
Please
you
let-
guys not making a record together?
We did do one recording together that is you can find it on streaming. We did it as part of a what was it? It was for I think when COVID hit, it was part of a quarantine album that we put out.
Okay.
And I think, but anyways, I think you can find David Pack, Tony Guerrero somewhere if you're searching for that.
I'm gonna do
Can't
that.
remember what-
Well, yeah,
Yeah, well,
let him
you
know
can
he's
look us up.
welcome.
Oh no,
anytime.
it wasn't for that. It wasn't for that. It was for a project called Jazz Responds, which was raising money for human trafficking aftercare.
Oh,
and
wow.
that came out a few years before COVID. So, but I think it's still out there streaming. But
All right, Tom, now you can say it.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, just pass along the invitation to David. He is welcome anytime.
I will
I'm a
do that.
Huge fan, huge fan.
yeah, I'll do that for sure.
Last question for me, Tony, is what is one thing or two things, maybe one thing that most people don't know about Chuck Mangione that they should know? To the casual fan that just knows Feel So Good and Children of Sanchez.
That's a good question because like I've said, I didn't know him personally, and I can only go off what I've read, but I've dug into as much of his background over the years as I could. He definitely wrote for other artists. There are there's like some early rock albums that he wrote songs for, and I couldn't name the bands right now, but you can go hear that. Everybody knows about his whole King of the Hill thing. Like, I thought that was so out of the blue and so brilliant. And I quote one line from that show all the time. In fact, as recently as last night at my show, before we went on, we just said, "Hey, are you ready to soft rock?" I just thought that was just the greatest line.
There must be
but
some reference to him on the Family Guy at some point. There has to be.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I mean, I've seen other references. There was my daughter watches Gilmore Girls, and there's a reference to Chuck Mangione on there.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he was part of our cultural, woven into our culture really over the last 40, 50 years. So I don't know that I know a lot of like backstory. I've heard a couple stories you probably can't tell on the air of traveling musicians and that kind of thing.
Nah.
But
well, we'll get off air then, so you can tell us directly. So, Tony Guerrero, thank you so much for coming on. This was fascinating. Great to meet you. Hope we can talk to you again. And I've just followed you on Facebook, so I can't wait to see some flugelhorn out of you.
All right, anytime. Thank you.
More than just page 99. All right. Hey. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
All right. Yeah, I didn't get to tell the story. Maybe I'll tell it in the after. That when I sent you the track, I had told you on that tune. I said, "Don't be too prepared. Don't try, don't try to figure something out. Just play and respond as though you're improvising the first time." And you said, "Yeah, well, here's take 2." I sent you. You sent me take 2, and it was perfect. And so,
good.
That's so pro, but it does. It feels natural and not overly thought out, but interesting, melodic, like you said.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad.
First time I heard the album, jumped right out at me. I'm like, who is this?
Oh,
I don't know. I may have texted you, John. I don't remember.
You did.
You explained, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is amazing.
Actually,